I can still remember that night like it was yesterday. The fog was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and the forest was eerily silent. But the silence didn't last for long. Lucy was only 8 years old, but the fear in her eyes made her seem so much older. She was running from something. Something that had no shape, no form. But you could feel its presence. She clung to that old doll like it was her lifeline, the only thing connecting her to a world that was rapidly slipping away. The fog was growing thicker, making it harder to see. The eerie whispers of the forest seemed to grow louder, swirling around her. She tripped and fell hard, losing her doll. The whispers intensified, almost as if mocking her fear. Suddenly, a shadowy figure moved swiftly in the background. Lucy's head snapped up, eyes wide with terror. She grabbed the doll and clutched it tightly, her fear mounting as the whispers grew louder, now a cacophony of ghostly voices. You could feel the forest closing in on her like it was alive, like it wanted to swallow her whole. Her feet pounded the forest floor, but suddenly she halted, realizing she was sinking into the ground, as if the forest itself was consuming her. She screamed for help, but the forest remained indifferent. Her voice echoed through the trees unanswered. Tears of despair filled her eyes as she began to disappear into the ground. She held the doll above her head in a futile attempt to keep it safe. With a final, horrifying scream, she vanished. The doll dropped to the ground, landing softly on the mossy floor. The whispers died down, replaced by an eerie silence. The forest stood silent, keeping its dark secrets. The whispers returned, softer this time, as if satisfied with their latest victim. The forest stood silent, keeping its dark secrets. 20 years later, and the forest still holds its secrets. But some secrets refuse to stay buried. My name is Samuel Hart. At 32 years old, I've made a modest name for myself as a writer, specializing in horror stories that delve into the darkest corners of the human psyche. But nothing I had ever written could prepare me for the reality of Ashwood's secrets. Ashwood, Maine is a town like no other. Perched on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean, it's a place where the mist never fully lifts, giving the town an ethereal, almost ghostly appearance. The air is perpetually filled with the scent of salt and pine, creating a sense of serenity that contrasts sharply with the unease that seems to permeate every corner of the town. The town itself is a blend of old and new. Colonial-era buildings stand alongside more modern structures, their weathered facades whispering secrets of the past. Ashwood's streets are narrow and winding, lined with ancient cobblestones that have seen centuries of footsteps. There's a timeless quality to the town, as if it's suspended in a different era, untouched by the relentless march of time. I arrived in Ashwood on a gray, overcast day, the kind of day that makes everything look a little more mysterious, a little more haunted. My grandmother, Evelyn Hart, had always been a distant figure in my life, a woman of legend and mystery. She was the kind of person who seemed larger than life, with stories and superstitions that felt out of place in the modern world. But now she was old and frail, and it was my turn to take care of her. Driving through the narrow streets of Ashwood, memories of my childhood came flooding back. The old bookstore where I spent countless hours lost in stories, the ice cream parlor with its sticky floors and sweet nostalgic smell, the playground where I had my first kiss. Everything was the same, yet different. There was a feeling of decay, as if the town itself was slowly succumbing to an unseen rot. My grandmother's house stood at the edge of town, near the entrance to the Whispering Woods. The house was a large, rambling structure, its paint peeling and its windows clouded with age. It was a place that had always seemed a little too big for one person, a little too full of shadows and secrets. The first few days in Ashwood were uneventful, filled with the routine of caring for my grandmother. Evelyn Hart had always been a formidable woman, a healer and keeper of old traditions, respected and feared by the townsfolk. My mother used to say she had one foot in this world and one in the next, always attuned to the unseen forces that shaped Ashwood. As I settled into my grandmother's old house, I started hearing faint whispers coming from the woods. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, the wind rustling through the trees, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent, until it was impossible to ignore them. One evening, as I was helping my grandmother with her dinner, she grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Stay away from the woods," she said, her voice a raspy whisper. "They're not safe. They've never been safe." I nodded, not wanting to upset her, but I couldn't help but feel a twinge of curiosity. The woods had always been a source of fascination for me as a child. I remembered the stories my friends and I used to tell, tales of ghosts and spirits, of strange lights and eerie sounds. But those were just stories, right? It started slowly at first, barely noticeable, just a faint, almost imperceptible whispering, like the rustle of leaves in the wind. But as the days passed, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. It was as if the woods were calling to me, drawing me in with a promise of secrets waiting to be uncovered. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself standing at the edge of the woods, the whispering louder than ever. It was a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, surrounding me, enveloping me. My grandmother's warning echoed in my mind, but my curiosity was stronger. I took a step forward, then another, and before I knew it, I was deep within the forest. The woods were dense, the trees towering above me, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. The ground was soft and damp beneath my feet, the air thick with the scent of earth and decay. The whispers guided me, leading me deeper into the forest until I came upon an old abandoned cabin. The cabin was small and dilapidated, its wooden walls covered in moss and ivy. The door creaked loudly as I pushed it open, revealing a dark, musty interior. As my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I saw an old diary lying on a table in the center of the room. It looked ancient, its leather cover cracked and worn. I picked up the diary and began to read. The entries were written in a neat, flowing script, telling the story of one of Ashwood's founders. It spoke of a pact made with a malevolent spirit to protect the town, a pact that required a great sacrifice. The founder had bound the spirit to the woods, but in return, the spirit demanded a new soul every 50 years. As I read, the whispers seemed to echo the words of the diary, confirming the story. The air grew colder, and I felt a sense of dread wash over me. The diary ended abruptly, with a final, chilling warning. The time for the next sacrifice was near, and the spirit was growing restless. I put the diary down, my hands trembling. The whispers had stopped, replaced by a heavy silence. Suddenly, a loud, disembodied voice broke the stillness, urging me to leave while I still could. I turned to leave, but as I reached the door, I realized I was not alone. Shadows moved in the corners of the room, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The spirit was here, and it wanted me to stay. Panic set in, and I ran, bursting out of the cabin and into the woods. The whispers had returned, louder and more frantic, as if they were trying to warn me. I stumbled through the forest, branches scratching at my face and arms, my heart pounding in my chest. I reached the edge of the woods, but an invisible force pulled me back. The spirit's voice was deafening, demanding that I fulfill the pact. I felt a cold, clammy hand on my shoulder, and I knew I was running out of time. With a desperate burst of strength, I broke free and ran towards my grandmother's house. The whispers followed me, growing fainter with each step until they finally faded into the distance. I collapsed at the doorstep, gasping for breath, my mind reeling from the experience. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to make sense of what had happened. My grandmother was too weak to answer my questions, but I knew I had to find a way to break the cycle. The spirit's reign of terror had to end, and I was determined to uncover the town's dark history and put an end to its malevolence. The days that followed my encounter in the woods were filled with research and discovery. I spent hours in the town library, poring over old records and historical documents. I interviewed the older residents, piecing together fragments of stories and rumors. The more I learned, the more I realized how deeply the supernatural was woven into the fabric of Ashwood. The town's history was a tapestry of strange events and unexplained phenomena. There were stories of disappearances, sudden deaths, and sightings of ghostly figures. The Whispering Woods were a common thread in many of these tales, a place where reality seemed to blur with the supernatural. One story in particular caught my attention. It was about the Blackwood family, one of the founding families of Ashwood. They had built a grand manor on the outskirts of town, a mansion that had stood empty for decades. The Blackwoods were said to have been involved in dark rituals, making pacts with otherworldly beings to gain power and influence. Their downfall was swift and brutal, their mansion abandoned and left to decay. I knew I had to visit Blackwood Manor. If there were answers to be found, they would be there. The manor was a looming presence on the horizon, its once grand facade now crumbling and overgrown. The air around it was thick with an oppressive energy, as if the very ground was tainted by the Blackwoods' dark deeds. I made my way through the overgrown gardens, the path to the front door barely visible. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, dusty interior. The air was heavy with the scent of mold and decay, and the floorboards creaked under my weight. I felt a sense of foreboding, but I pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets hidden within. The manor was a labyrinth of rooms and corridors, each one more decayed and unsettling than the last. I found an old study, its shelves lined with books on the occult and the supernatural. On the desk, I discovered a series of journals, their pages filled with detailed accounts of rituals and pacts. The Blackwoods had indeed made a deal with the spirit in the woods, binding it to the town in exchange for protection and prosperity. But there was a catch. The spirit demanded a new soul every 50 years, and the Blackwoods had been the ones to provide it. When the family fell into ruin, the responsibility had passed to the town itself. The journals spoke of a ritual that could break the pact, but it required a powerful artifact, an amulet said to be hidden somewhere in the manor. I spent hours searching the manor, my nerves on edge. The shadows seemed to move on their own, and I could hear faint whispers echoing through the halls. I finally found the amulet hidden in a secret compartment behind a portrait. It was a simple piece of jewelry, a silver pendant with a dark red stone at its center, but I could feel its power. With the amulet in hand, I returned to my grandmother's house. She was weaker than ever, her breaths shallow and labored. I told her everything I had discovered, and for the first time she looked at me with something other than fear. There was a glimmer of hope in her eyes, a belief that we could finally break the cycle. The ritual had to be performed in the woods at the site of the original pact. I waited until nightfall, the whispers growing louder as I made my way to the clearing. The air was thick with tension, the trees looming like silent sentinels. I began the ritual, reciting the words from the journal and holding the amulet aloft. The ground trembled, and a cold wind swept through the clearing. The spirit appeared, a dark, amorphous figure, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. It demanded the soul it was owed, but I refused, standing my ground. I channeled the power of the amulet, focusing on breaking the pact. The spirit screamed, its form writhing and contorting as it fought against the binding. For a moment, it seemed as if I might succeed. The spirit's form flickered, and the whispers grew frantic. But then, with a final, ear-piercing wail, the amulet shattered in my hand. The spirit surged forward, its presence overwhelming. I felt a cold, clammy hand on my shoulder, and I knew I was lost. The The spirit's voice was deafening, demanding that I fulfill the pact. I felt my strength draining away, my vision blurring. The last thing I saw was the spirit's glowing eyes, filled with triumph and malice. I awoke in my grandmother's house, the morning sun streaming through the windows. The whispers were gone, replaced by an eerie silence. I stumbled to my grandmother's room, finding her still and cold, a serene smile on her lips. She had passed away during the night, her soul claimed by the spirit. The town of Ashwood was quiet, but I knew the peace was temporary. The spirit had won, and the cycle would continue. I had failed to break the pact, and now the town was at the mercy of the malevolent force that lurked in the woods. As I sat on the porch, watching the mist roll in from the sea, I heard a new whisper. This one was different, more insidious. It spoke of Blackwood Manor, of dark secrets and unfinished business. The spirit was not done with Ashwood, and neither was I. The whispers had revealed a new path, a new challenge. The haunting of Blackwood Manor awaited, and I knew I had to uncover the truth if I ever hoped to save Ashwood from its dark fate. I stood up, my resolve hardening. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the town. I knew that the battle was far from over, and the spirit's grip on Ashwood was tightening. As I turned to go back inside, I felt a cold breeze brush past me, carrying with it the faint sound of a child's laughter. I froze, my heart pounding. The laughter grew louder, more distinct, coming from the direction of Blackwood Manor. I glanced back at the house one last time, then started walking towards the manor. The whispers followed me, weaving a sinister tale of horror and hope. The haunting of Blackwood Manor was just beginning, and I was determined to face whatever lay ahead. The spirit might have won this round, but the fight was far from over. Ashwood's secrets were waiting to be uncovered, and I was ready to confront the darkness. The whispers grew louder, guiding me towards the manor, and as I walked into the gathering twilight, I knew that the true nightmare was only just beginning.